There are moments on live television that stop the world. Not the breaking news alerts, not the scripted emotional segments carefully prepared by producers, not the rehearsed tears over feel-good stories. This was different. This was real. Savannah Guthrie, one of the most composed, polished, and respected anchors in American broadcast history, faltered on live television, and the silence that followed lasted only seconds. But those seconds said everything. Millions of viewers watched, and millions of viewers felt something shift. Because when someone that strong, that professional, that always put together breaks down in front of a camera, you don't change the channel. You lean in. You hold your breath. You feel something you didn't expect to feel on a Tuesday morning. But here's what the cameras didn't show you. Here's what the producers never discussed on air. Here's what the headlines missed entirely. Because behind that moment of raw, unfiltered emotion was a story that had been building for years. A story of personal battles fought quietly, of sacrifices made in silence, of a woman who carried more than most people will ever know and carried it with a smile, a blazer, and a perfectly timed cue. This is not just a story about one moment. This is the story of who Savannah Guthrie really is, what she survived, what she lost, what she almost lost again, and why that moment on air wasn't a breakdown at all. It was a breakthrough. Stay with us, because this story is worth every second. Picture this. It's early morning in New York City, the kind of morning where the city is already buzzing. Before most of the country has poured their first cup of coffee, the lights inside Studio 1A at Rockefeller Plaza are bright and unforgiving. Every blemish, every shadow, every flicker of genuine human emotion exposed. Savannah Guthrie has walked into that studio hundreds of times. Thousands, actually. She knows every camera angle, every floor mark, every producer's voice in her earpiece. She knows when to smile, when to pivot, when to hold space for a grieving guest without making the moment about herself. She is, by every professional measure, exceptional at what she does. But on this particular morning, something was different. You could feel it before you could see it. There was a weight behind her eyes that no amount of studio lighting could erase, a tension in her jaw that no amount of professionalism could fully conceal. And when the moment came, when the words hit her in a way she hadn't fully prepared for, the armor cracked. Just slightly, just enough. And the world saw it. But to truly understand why that moment mattered so deeply, you have to understand who Savannah Guthrie was long before the cameras were ever pointed at her. She didn't grow up dreaming of television. She grew up dreaming of law. Born in Tucson, Arizona, raised partly in Melbourne, Florida, Savannah was the kind of kid who asked too many questions and stayed up too late, thinking about the answers, sharp, relentlessly curious, and gifted with an ability to get to the truth of a thing, a gift that would define every chapter of her career. She earned her law degree from Georgetown. She practiced law. She was good at it. But something kept pulling her toward storytelling, toward journalism, toward the place where facts met human lives and both were changed in the telling. So she made the leap. And she didn't just land, she soared. From local news to NBC, from correspondent to White House press corps, from early morning fill-in to co-anchor of one of the most watched morning programs in the country. Every step was earned. Every promotion was the result of grit, intelligence, and a fierce refusal to let the pressure of live television get the better of her. She became the anchor that other anchors respected, the journalist that politicians feared sitting across from, the face that millions of Americans woke up to, trusting, familiar, warm. And yet, behind all of it, behind the blazers and the bright lights, and the perfectly modulated voice, Savannah Guthrie was carrying things the audience never fully knew, or things that were about to catch up with her. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being the person everyone else depends on. It's not the loneliness of isolation. It's the loneliness of visibility, of being seen by millions and truly known by very few, of performing stability so consistently that the people around you forget you're allowed to be unstable, of being the anchor in every sense of the word, while quietly wondering who anchors you. Savannah Guthrie knew that loneliness intimately. She had built a career on presence, on being fully there, fully engaged, fully reliable. but presence, sustained over years and decades, takes a toll that doesn't show up in ratings or reviews. It shows up at 3 a.m. when your mind won't stop. It shows up in the quiet moments between segments when the smile fades and the real feelings finally surface. It shows up when something in your personal life begins to fracture and you have exactly 90 seconds before your mic goes live again. And Savannah's personal life had seen its fractures. Her first marriage ended, a chapter closed publicly, enough to sting privately. She rebuilt. She moved forward. She found love again with Mike Feldman, a political consultant who became her partner in the truest sense, steady, grounded, wholly committed to the life they were building together. But the building wasn't without cost. There were the fertility struggles, the quiet heartbreak of wanting something deeply and not knowing if your body would cooperate, the kind of private pain that doesn't fit neatly into a morning news segment, but sits with you through every single one. Then came the pregnancies, the joy, the children, Vale and Charlie, who changed everything about the way Savannah understood what really mattered. And with them came a new version of the old tension. How do you give everything to your career and everything to your children and somehow still have something left for yourself? She managed it. She always managed it. But managing and thriving are two very different things. Behind the scenes, people who worked closely with Savannah often described the same quality. She was relentlessly positive and privately exhausted in equal measure. She lifted the energy of every room she entered, and she rarely let anyone see what it cost her to do that every single day. Then came the health crisis that changed everything. In 2016, Savannah Guthrie began losing vision in her right eye, quietly at first, then faster, then frighteningly fast. She had suffered a detached retina, and then, as if the universe had decided one scare wasn't enough, she suffered a second injury, an accidental poke to the eye during playtime with her daughter that threatened the sight. She had only barely managed to save. Think about that for a moment. A journalist, a woman whose entire career depends on her ability to read, to make eye contact, to project confidence and clarity, facing the potential loss of her eyesight. And through all of it, she showed up. She sat in that chair. She read those headlines until one morning, she couldn't quite hold it all together. There are things we ask of public figures that we would never ask of ourselves. We ask them to be consistent when life is inconsistent. We ask them to be calm when the world is chaotic. We ask them to grieve publicly, but not too much. To struggle visibly, but not too silly. To be human, but only in ways that fit neatly inside a 2-minute segment. Savannah Guthrie had been meeting those impossible expectations for years. And what most people don't fully appreciate is the particular pressure of morning television. It is not glamorous in the way people imagine. The hours are brutal, arriving at the studio before most of New York City has even opened its eyes, reading briefs, preparing segments, coordinating with producers, managing the unpredictable chaos of live news all before the sun has properly risen. There is no room for bad days. There is no calling in sad. There is no quietly falling apart in the break room and then taking the afternoon off to recover. You sit, you smile, you deliver. And then you do it again tomorrow. For Savannah, this rhythm had become her entire life. But beneath the rhythm, things were shifting. Her eye condition had left her shaken in a way that went deeper than the physical threat. It had cracked something open in her, a vulnerability she had spent years carefully managing, a fear she had never fully let herself name. What if she couldn't keep going? What if the career she had built, the life she had constructed, the identity she had worn so confidently for so long, what if all of it was more fragile than she had allowed herself to believe? Those questions don't get answered in press releases. They don't get resolved in morning segments or magazine profiles. They live inside a person, quiet and heavy, until something finally brings them to the surface. And surfaces are exactly what live television provides. The moment that stopped viewers, the moment that rippled across social media and spawned 1,000 headlines, was not a manufactured emotional beat. It was not a segment designed to generate empathy. It was the opposite of planned. It was a genuine human being, in a genuine human moment, unable to keep the feeling entirely contained. What made it so powerful wasn't the breaking down. It was who was breaking down. Because when someone who never cracks finally cracks, even just slightly, you feel the weight of everything they've been holding. You feel the years behind that moment. You understand, in an instant, that this person has been carrying something real, and the audience felt it. The response was immediate, not cruel, not mocking. The internet, which is capable of extraordinary unkindness, responded this time with something closer to tenderness. Comments flooded in. Messages were sent. The overwhelming feeling was not "look at her falling apart," but something far warmer. "We see you. We see what you've been carrying. Thank you for being real." That response, that collective, instinctive warmth, said something important, not just about Savannah, but about what people are actually hungry for in the media they consume. Not perfection, not performance. Truth. Let's single quotes talk about what it actually means to show up. Not in the motivational poster sense, not in the hashtag sense, in the real, daily, grinding sense of continuing to put one foot in front of the other when everything in you wants to stop. Savannah Guthrie has shown up in ways that most of her audience never fully witnessed. She showed up the morning after her eye surgery when the uncertainty of her vision was still unresolved and the fear was still fresh. She showed up through the quiet grief of personal losses that never made it to air. She showed up through the particular fatigue of being a mother of young children, with an ungodly early call time, running on insufficient sleep, and the kind of love that demands everything you have. She showed up through a global pandemic that turned live television into something unrecognizable, anchoring from home, managing the chaos of breaking news with the additional chaos of children in the background, presenting information about a world in crisis while living inside her own small version of that crisis. She showed up when the political climate was at its most volatile, when being a journalist meant being a target, when doing your job with integrity meant absorbing anger from people who disagreed with the questions you were brave enough to ask. She showed up for colleagues who were struggling, for interviews that were painful, for stories that deserved more than she sometimes had left to give. And she gave anyway. That kind of sustained showing up, that is not performance, that is character, and character, unlike talent, is not visible in a single standout moment. Character is what you see when you look at the whole arc of a life, when you step back from the individual headlines and see the pattern they form together. The pattern Savannah Guthrie's life forms is one of quiet, persistent resilience, not the loud, triumphant resilience of comeback stories. The quieter kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that just keeps moving, keeps creating, keeps showing up, even when showing up costs something real. And yet resilience, even the quiet kind, has limits. There are moments when the cost simply becomes too visible to hide. When the wall you've built, carefully maintained over years, develops a crack that lets the light out and lets the world in. For Savannah, that moment was not a failure. That moment was, in many ways, the most honest thing she had ever broadcast. Because in all her years of professional, polished, measured television, this was the moment that felt most like truth, most like a real person, most like someone you could actually know, actually understand, actually sit beside in the hard moments of your own life. And isn't that, ultimately, what great journalism is supposed to do? Not just inform, not just analyze, but connect, human to human, story to story, heart to heart. Savannah connected, completely, unexpectedly, unforgettably. There's a conversation happening in this country, and frankly, round the world, about what we ask of the people we put on pedestals. We elevate public figures to positions of extraordinary visibility, and then we are quietly surprised when they reveal themselves to be exactly as fragile, as complicated, as quietly struggling as everyone else, as if the lights and the cameras somehow insulate them from the ordinary grief of being human. They don't. Savannah Guthrie's story, in its fullness, not just in its most viral moment, is a story about what happens when a woman refuses to pretend that struggle doesn't exist, when she allows, even briefly, the reality of her experience to surface in a public space. And the world didn't punish her for it. The world recognized itself in her. That is not a small thing. In the years following that visible moment of raw emotion, Savannah did something that many public figures simply don't. She talked about it, not obsessively, not in the performed and packaged way that can sometimes reduce real experience to content, but genuinely and thoughtfully. She spoke about the weight of chronic stress, about the importance of mental health, about the particular challenges of sustaining a high-profile career while navigating the ordinary and extraordinary demands of personal life. She spoke about her faith, a part of her life she holds with conviction and humility, not as a performance of righteousness, but as a genuine source of steadiness in a life that was sometimes anything but steady. And she spoke about joy. This is the part that often gets overlooked in stories like this, because struggle is dramatic and joy is quieter. But joy is also the point. Joy is the reason people fight through the hard things. Joy is what waits on the other side of the breaking down. Savannah found it in her marriage, in her children, in the work itself, on the days when the work felt like a calling rather than a grind, in friendships, in faith, in the ordinary moments that don't make headlines, but make a life genuinely worth living. She also found it in the unexpected gift that difficult moments sometimes bring clarity. When you've been forced to examine what you're carrying, you also get to decide what to set down. You get to redefine what matters. You get to rebuild, not from scratch, but from a more honest foundation, one that doesn't require you to pretend that everything is fine all the time. Savannah Guthrie emerged from her most vulnerable public moment not diminished, but somehow larger, more fully herself, more trusted by the audience that had watched her for years, more respected by the colleagues who understood exactly what it had cost her to be that real in that moment, because vulnerability, when it's genuine, doesn't weaken a person's authority. It deepens it. And in the end, that is what Savannah Guthrie gave her audience on that unremarkable Tuesday morning, when everything became, briefly and beautifully, real. She gave them permission to be human. Here is what we want you to take with you from this story. Not the headlines, not the moment itself, though that moment matters. What we want you to take is this: the people who appear the strongest are often carrying the most. The smile that never wavers is sometimes covering something that aches. The professional composure you've admired for years might be built on a foundation of private struggle you'll never fully know. And the moment someone lets that composure slip, even just slightly, it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of trust. Savannah Guthrie trusted her audience with a real moment, and her audience, at its best, responded with real humanity. That exchange, that brief, unscripted, honest exchange between a person on a screen and the millions watching, is a reminder of something we need right now, maybe more than ever. We need realness. We need stories that don't resolve neatly. We need to see people we admire struggle and continue. We need to be reminded that strength is not the absence of difficulty. It is the decision to keep going in the middle of it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. If this story reminded you of your own quiet carrying that matters to you, don't have to be on television to be brave. You just have to show up. Like she did every single morning.